where you are, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar on the topic of implications of COVID-19 impacts on gender equity within the cooperative movement. Would like to state that this particular topic will be more focusing on the African region. However, we do have some guest speakers who are coming beyond the African region, namely from Asia Pacific and representing the whole global office, as well as Europe. And that is representing the ILO Coop units office. The main purpose of this particular meeting is to have a conversation among ourselves, government officials, cooperative leaders, and other stakeholders in deliberating and discussing on the current issues at hand, which is the COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on us, and more so on the most marginalized group, which touches mostly the women being the most marginalized group. Knowing that gender is not only about women, however, when we talk about gender, the most marginalized group of the gender is more of the women. So basically, we shall be looking at what are the best cooperatives, how can cooperative-based mitigate the impact of COVID-19 through gender equality. And the main organizers of this particular webinar are WeEffect, our partner, that is WeEffect East African office, and our African Gender Committee from the International Cooperative Alliance Africa. We'll have some few specific objectives which we hope we'll be able to achieve at the end of this particular meeting. And one is to first recap the role of gender equality in cooperative developments. And we shall have some speakers who will be alluding on the same and try to get us through that particular topic. We'll also highlight the gender dimension in the cooperative movement during this particular pandemic. So what is the peculiarity about the gender issue during this COVID-19? We'll also try to understand the importance to use data to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on women and the girls. That's quite important. I think it might go beyond the data, but also that is mostly the ICT, I might say. We'll also go and look at or rather expound on how self-branding and image in the context of gender can help us respond to this particular situation and mitigate the impact of crises such as COVID-19. We shall also share knowledge and cases on possible strategies and policy recommendation to protect the most vulnerable during this time of crisis. You all know that COVID-19, though it started from China, it has shown us how we are all connected. And I think there is no particular place under this sun which is not affected by the COVID-19. From the rural to the big cities, from the developed to underdeveloped countries or least developed countries, from men to women, from adults to children, I think we are all concerned and we are all affected. That has shown us how we are all connected and how we should work together to make sure that we find solutions and everlasting solutions. Africa has also been exposed more than other continent for the mere fact that we're not prepared for such crises, given our healthcare system infrastructure, which is quite haunting, our economies, which are still fragile, and coupled with the climate changes impacts, we have parts of Africa which is suffering from droughts, while others are suffering from floods, and in between we have got the locust invasion, and then now we are talking about this COVID-19, which is complicating the situation. And that is why we thought, we also know that in Africa, when it comes to gender equality, though it's a topic which also cut across the cultures, the continents, and the status, economic status, but more so is more pronounced in Africa for the various reasons that you shall come to know from the different speakers. And that's why we thought that we as Africans, we are at most risk and will be most impacted or affected. And that is why we need to converse and start to speaking now and see how we can strategize and make sure that we get well prepared to first face this particular pandemic, but coming out of it more stronger than we were before. So without further ado, I'd like to maybe mention some few speakers who will be taking us through this particular topic. First and foremost, I would like to thank the technical team from WeEffects and our ICA-Africa office, and namely Faith from WeEffects, and we have got Eric, Asira, and Virginia from our own office working behind the scene. Professor Esha Gisheru from the Cooperative University of Kenya, who is also the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration and Finance, and doubles as the chair lady for the Gender Committee for the International Cooperative Alliance Africa, will be the moderator for this particular session. And Jonathan Kioko, whom quite a number of our gender activists on the continent know very well, because he has been with us on various occasions speaking and taking and training our members on gender issues. He's currently program director of UFEX, but previously, as you knew him, he was the gender expert with the same organization. And it was in that capacity that we have interacted with him in the past. I would like also to mention here that Tepsi, who is the women representative to the ICA African board, wanted really to be with us and share her wisdom and some word, but unfortunately, because of the prevailing COVID-19 situation in South Africa, she has been affected quite on a closer range, and that is the reason why she could not be able to be with us today. But if she finds time, she can join us later on. We'll also have Monica Emiru, who comes from, who is the executive director from National Association of Women Organization in Uganda. She'll be sharing with us this perspective from Uganda. We have our very able Dr. Nadini Azad from ICA Global Gender Equality Committee, but she doubles up. She has got almost three hats that I know of. First, the global one, but also the regional and the national one. We have got our dear sister Simel Esim from the International Labour Organization, representing the COP units, who will also be taking us through and giving us some word of encouragement and wisdom from Europe and the ILO. Masinjeru from Cusco, quite versant with agricultural, rural agricultural cooperative, but also the Cuscos and the leadership in circles across Africa. We'll also hear some few words of wisdom from her. Neema Grace Muthemi, an expert. She's more of what I call all-rounded young lady, very promising, and who is also an expert on social media. She's a communication expert, and we'll be more than happy to hear the young upcoming leaders of this Africa taking the floor and discussing issues pertaining to the youth, but also to the women and the communication matters. Fiona Shemeriwe from Uganda Housing Cooperative, will also be telling us that particular sector. Why did we choose housing cooperatives? I think we have come to know that among, we have been taught to stay home and keep distance. And we came also to realize that in Africa, that is quite a luxury. And that is why housing is very important for us. Those who can afford to stay home and still manage as business as usual are those ones who have got decent housing. We know that it is a privilege to have one in Africa, and I think Fiona will be able to allude to that and give us more word of wisdom from there. Last but not least is what the one I call Mama. It is Hadija DJ Jibrin Bala, a very well distinguished and established human rights, I might call, activist in terms of gender. She has been a PS commissioner, and currently in Nigeria, we are calling her Cooperative Mama. That is according to the CFN because of what she has accomplished, and she should be able to tell us more about that. We are very much happy and delighted to have from the young to the old, from the public to the civil society activists and the cooperative leaders across the world. You have seen that it's quite a well balanced and well represented panel of speakers. Without further ado, I would like now to call upon first our co-hosts, that is We Effect representative here. We have Jonathan Kioko to take the floor. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sifa, and for the organizers of this very important session. My name is Jonathan Kioko. I work with We Effect, the programs director. I've been working in a cooperative movement now for well over 10 years, previously having practiced in other areas of development. So it's such a great pleasure today to be able to share with you our experience. I want to give you a background of We Effect. We Effect is not a cooperative, and so maybe someone would be wondering and asking, how come We Effect is there together with other cooperative organizations? So We Effect is a development organization which has been working using the long-term development approach since 1958. And the organization was born through the cooperative movement, Swedish cooperative movement. So that is where we develop our link to the cooperative movement. We have well over around more than 60 member organizations which came to go together to form the We Effect. And for those who have known us for some time, you know that initially We Effect used to be called Swedish Cooperative Center, in case you knew SCC, but now since 2013, it's changed to We Effect. And our vision is a sustainable and just world free from poverty. And to realize that, we work through strengthening member-based organizations so that the member-based organizations that we work with all over the world gain the ability so that they can be able to support men and women to improve their living conditions. Our values are aligned to the International Cooperative Alliance values, as you know them, they are listed there. So, yeah. And we are working in about 25 countries globally. You can see we are in Latin America, we are in Eastern Africa, we are in Southern Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia, those parts of the world. I want to mention that we apply the rights-based approach, and this is very important to us because this is where the gender equality perspective is anchored. We believe in the human rights approach in our work. Therefore, we work in two levels: addressing the effects and the root causes of poverty. If it's lack of food, we address it at that point, but look at the base. What are the root causes of lack of food security among the people we are working with. So we support mainly people to join together, to come together so that they can be able to support themselves just the way the cooperative principles work. So I want to mention something slightly more on a human rights-based approach, as now I introduce the gender equality perspective that we apply, because it's very important to us. We believe that all people are entitled to a certain standard of life, and we emphasize that people have rights, but there are also responsibilities. And people living in poverty are active right holders. They are not just beneficiaries. They have a role to play and to be engaged. And therefore, we believe in development by people, not development for people. We work in two core areas, that is sustainable rural development, adequate housing. In East Africa, we are working with about 36 partners, most of them being cooperatives and other member-based organizations. But as we work in these two areas, we also focus a lot on other 4 key areas which we believe are very key and important in order for those 2 sectors to be successful. One of them, gender equality, is a strong pillar, and it is the main ingredient of the 2 programs that I've mentioned. Number 2, we also include financial services, environment and climate change risk reduction is another area we work on, as well as advocacy. Our work in gender equality, one, as we recognize that women are disproportionately marginalized, and for poverty to be eradicated, they must be involved and their opportunities to develop themselves expanded. So once we noted this, from 2006, if I can just give a brief preview on how we have advanced our work in gender equality. From 2006, we had a project whose role was promoting gender equality mainstreaming within the programs that we implement. But when it came to 2012, we scaled it a bit more. And a policy was passed, and we said we needed a fully fledged gender equality program in each of those regions where we work globally. And the gender equality program was set up in all the regions, including East Africa, South Africa, and all the other areas that we work in. And that is how some of the partners on gender equality, specifically working on gender equality, came on board, besides the cooperatives that we are working with, to come and support our cooperatives. For example, the National Association of Women in Uganda, which is where Monica comes from, where it comes to support cooperatives to ensure that gender equality is observed. So in 2018, 2022, we said gender equality is not just going to be an add-on, but it's going to be the main ingredient that we'll be using in the development programs that we are implementing. So we developed a strategy which we called the Equality First. So the aim was to ensure that everybody, right from we effect and partners, wear gender equality lenses in development work that we are doing. And we are focusing on gender transformative approaches, addressing all the structural and other norms that cause inequalities for change. Now, with the COVID-19, this strategy has been interrupted a bit. Of course, business could not continue as usual because this is a pandemic which has affected everywhere. Like Sifa mentioned, not a single country under the sun has not been affected. So we developed an interim strategy together with our partners in consultation. We have an interim strategy 2020-2021, which is now about responding to the challenges that have been posed by COVID-19. And so we want gender equality to be integrated in every part of the work that we are doing. There are key areas that we focus on as we work on gender equality. I'll mention after this the specifics about the interim strategy. But before I mention that, I want to mention 4 key areas that we focus on. We focus on increased women's participation both in membership and leadership for cooperatives and the member-based organizations we work with. Women's right to land, that is very key, a productive resource which cannot be underestimated, particularly in our region and other regions of the world. At least 50% of women, we are saying we want to see increased incomes to women. As we do our development, we want to see women having more income in their pockets, because most of the time they've provided labor, but when it comes to income, they do not get a fair share of the same. So those are the areas that we are looking at. And I head towards concluding, now talking about the context of COVID-19. There has been restricted movements globally, and together with our partners, we've been able to revise work plans so that we can be able to see what is the urgent matter that needs to be attended to ensure that we are not off the mark in terms of the changes that have come as a result of COVID-19. With these disruptions, our focus, based on the consultations that we've had with our partners, we've said the focus will be right to food. And of course, you know, when it comes to the right to food, the role that women play in this area. So this means that the women participation will even be more stronger in the coming periods for WeEffect and partners that we are working with, because women play a critical role in ensuring food availability in their families. We know also that women are the ones who are commonly involved in the SMEs, which were heavily impacted. They closed down, some of them went under, and so there will be need for them to be supported a lot to be able to bounce back and to continue with their livelihoods. So these are some of the areas that we are working together with our partners to ensure that we address. Disruption of food chains has been a major area, urban areas, and as I've mentioned, our current interim strategy will be looking at sustainable food chains. Gender-based violence has been noted to have increased, at least in the East Africa region and other parts of the world. And this is an area that we want to continuously work on in this current period to see how that can be addressed. ICT is another area which has been noted as a possible solution for people to be able to attend conferencing, seminars, and even for extension work. But there is a problem with the skewed access, where most women maybe access to gadgets and internet is skewed in that manner. And therefore, that poses a challenge that needs to be discussed and addressed as we move forward. So I think it's a scenario that is that needs still to be checked and addressed to ensure that we leave no one behind, as the Agenda 2030 mandates us to do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan Kioko. And you have heard it from WeEffect. WeEffect is a key partner with ICA-Africa. They have been sponsoring the implementation of our strategy, the ICA-Africa Cooperative Development Strategy 2017-2020. And they have been key and instrumental in promoting cooperative throughout the continent. I have seen questions, and I hope Kioko, you'll be able to respond to them. We have been putting the same demand to WeEffect to make sure that they can crisscross Africa, not only being in two sub-regions, that is East and the South. And I think we have already gotten some of those reactions, and please respond to them and pass the same and share the same sentiments. We have seen quite a number of partners and friends of cooperative movement in Africa joining. We have had fair trade, we have had agroforestry, we have had quite a number of them also from housing in Nakuru, among others. So we are very much appreciative. I would like now to thank you once again for giving me this platform, and I would like now to hand over the program to Professor Gisheru, who is the moderator for today's session. Professor, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sifa, for taking charge for the first part of the program. And I'm happy that you have welcomed all the participants and even introduced the purpose and objectives of today's meeting. Yeah, so I was already introduced, so I don't want to repeat. So apart from working at the Cooperative University of Kenya, I said that I'm also the chair of the Gender Committee of ICA-Africa. And in that context, I'll be giving some few introductions before we bring in other members to speak. I want to start by saying our distinguished guests, our cooperators, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say good afternoon and salute all of you, whether you are in the morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. So I want to take this chance to welcome you all to this webinar. It is indeed a pleasure to join you all to discuss the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on gender equality within the cooperative movement. I take this opportunity to make this presentation on the general outlook of the pandemic in the African continent and its impact on gender equality within the cooperative movement. Just like Dr. Siva said, COVID-19 was, just a minute. I have a challenge. Yeah, COVID-19 was first detected in China in December 2019, and since declared a public health emergency of international concern on 30th January 2020 by the World Health Organization. And ever since, the pandemic has spread far and wide, covering, And as at 16th July 2020, 213 countries and territories around the world, with reported cases of over 13.6 million and a death toll of over 585,000, and the cases are rising on a daily basis. I think we have all witnessed this. We have been watching the news. And the pandemic has posed very serious threats to human life and economies, with a very severe projected economic recession. The marginalized groups have been hit hard, and for instance, women's employment and livelihoods has deepened pre-existing inequalities and exposed cracks in socio, political, and economic systems. According to the United Nations Women Press release of 12 May 2020, globally women represent 55.8% of employees in service industries, while in the G7 countries, women make up around 88% of the service industry workforce, and nearly 60% of women around the world work in the informal economy, earning less, saving less, and at greater risk of falling into poverty. Most are unable to work remotely and may require additional care support for children or older family members as they leave their homes to work. The situation is far much more in Africa continent, considering its vulnerability to such crises. According to a report by Australian Institute of International Affairs, which was produced in May 2020, Sub-Saharan Africa has only one female head of state, that is the Ethiopian president. However, the vital role of women health ministers in the fight against COVID-19 in the region provides a case study for the gendered effects of leadership through the pandemic. 13 out of the 54 countries in the region have female ministers of health. These women are working in ministries that are often underfunded and undervalued, yet vital to contain this virus. It is clear that the pandemic has not affected men and women equally. Thus, it is crucial to recognize the different ways the pandemic has affected men and women in the continent. Women are at the forefront of fighting the pandemic. They suffer from gender-specific challenges, such as constraints in accessing health and reproductive services, and at a higher risk of physical and sexual abuse resulting from stringent lockdown measures. Women participate disproportionately in unpaid caregiving, which places them at risk of catching the virus even more easily. Unskilled women who are unable to compete in the formal labor market become entrenched in an economical, vulnerable position that is difficult to overcome. The COVID-19 pandemic and its social and economic impacts have created a global crisis unparalleled in the history of the United Nations, and one which requires a whole of society response to match its sheer scale and complexity. But this response, whether at the national or international level, will be significantly weakened if it does not factor in ways in which inequalities have made all of us more vulnerable to the impact of the crisis, and more so in our business models, such as our cooperative movement. The UN Women Press release of 12 May 2020 asserts that compounded economic impacts are felt mostly, especially by women and girls who are generally earning less, saving less, and holding insecure jobs or living close to poverty. As ICA-Africa Gender Committee, our mission is to ensure that gender equality and equity is systematically taken into account in all cooperative policies and programs, working environment, work practices, monitoring and evaluation systems, and to establish the requisite structures, processes, and timeframes for achieving this. The cooperative community is always inspired by its principles and values, and is therefore obligated to join efforts with other key stakeholders to first help with mitigating the spread of this disruptive COVID-19 outbreak and the implementation of recovery strategies to sustain livelihoods, as well as aid in gender equality. In order to reduce gender inequality during the fight against COVID-19, those in the top leadership roles should support, promote, and implement gender-responsive leadership positions in ministerial portfolios and even in the hospitals. This will facilitate gender equality that then reduces vulnerability of those who face violence and economic hardships the more. There is also a need to recognize women who have tirelessly worked to save lives against the devastating virus. In conclusion, I believe that the discussions during this webinar will enlighten us on how best cooperatives can mitigate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic through gender equality. And with these remarks, I hope I have set the ground for insightful deliberations by all our facilitators and responses from our participants. And I thank you for listening. Thank you very much. And now from there, I think we need to move on to our next speaker. Like we said, if there are any questions, they are going to come at the end. And we have been requested that if we have any issues we want to raise, we can put them on the chat so that we can manage time. So for the speakers who are coming from here, we are going to have 10 minutes presentation by each one of them. And I would like to present to you Dr. Nadine Azad, who has already been introduced. Probably she can add one or two words about herself as Nadine, you proceed to make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear friend Esther. And to all my sisters in Africa, greetings for fighting the COVID with great courage from the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to congratulate the director, Madam Sifa, yourself, and of course the WeEffect, particularly as you're the first regional committee to have made such a good webinar. So congratulations and a lot of clapping for you. Because, you know, this is a very, you know, important juncture to share, because, you know, we cannot communicate because of the social distancing. But sharing is so important, what these continents are doing, and Asia, Pacific, and Africa, there are so many similarities. I'm here because of the Gender Equality Committee. You know, this is the dedicated committee in the International Cooperative Alliance, which is looking at the gender equality issues, and there's much more to the committee. And I'm sure I can answer that during the course of the time, during the course of the question and answer session. And I'm also the chair of the Women's Committee of the Asia Pacific, and on the GEC, the Gender Equality Committee. But, you know, one of the things I'm very proud of is that in 50 years, the International Raiffeisen Union, which is one of our biggest, oldest cooperative unions, had me as their first woman member after 50 years. So there was a lot of work that I had to do, but I'm so glad that, you know, this is the oldest committee, which really began from the farmers' movement and from the, you know, problem of exploitation of moneylenders, etc., which is very common to all our countries. Now, let me start. I'm going to make two presentations because, you know, I believe in theory and practice. So I'm going to give you some practice before I quickly pull it up for you on the subject matter that you have given me. While the overall corona numbers are partial to men, for something that, you know, they are partial to this time, and while women's numbers in some continents are much less, as somebody mentioned, we are the frontline workers. I call them the heroines of COVID. These women workers who are working as health workers, caregivers at home, and triple burden. Two burdens, and all of us, I'm sure Madam Sifa agrees with me and other people, that with the two, she said, people who have little housing, it becomes a third burden. So we've got three burdens, all of us, particularly women, and very dynamic of Madam Sifa to have this. And I think because you're a woman director, and I shouldn't be saying it, but I will say it, that you could bring in this webinar, which nobody else has brought in the last 3-4 months. And really congratulations to you. Because in spite of the fact that they are not partial to us as numbers, we are the worst sufferers. Women are the worst sufferers. So I'm going to give you first the practice, how we fought this on the ground. Because while I'm an academic, I'm first a practitioner and an activist, having been born to a legendary cooperator all over Asia, you know, and a feminist. So therefore I must talk on the ground first, because for Africa that will be quite useful. Now, I come from, as I said, the Working Women's Forum and the Indian Cooperative Network for Women. We have 600,000 people, and I said 4 states, like 4 countries of Africa, a little bit more even. And we've given 5 billion US dollars in small loans. No joke at all. And a repayment rate of 97%. We are a little bit cribbing now because the repayment has gone to 90%. So our women are fighting to keep their bank alive. And most of us, it's been the hardest part of our life, keeping all our institutions alive. And I'm sure many of the women here are doing that because it's a question of survival. There is no other way. Now, what do we do apart from that? One of the things I think, my sisters from Africa, please listen. Gender-based violence, cooperatives should start having a unit on that, and that's what we did. We ran helplines at the worst times of the lockdown because you can give loans, you can take savings, because when there is no livelihood, you have no other option but to be at home, and you know what partner abuse is. So kindly, we did the first conference last year in the Asia Pacific on gender-based violence and cooperatives, a hitherto taboo subject because people were not talking about it. But there are no sexual harassment committees also in our own cooperatives. So where will we go and preach? But being a women's only cooperative for us, all CEOs women, the governing board women, all workers women, organizers, you can imagine if you have 600,000, how many unpaid, voluntary workers and how many we have. Now, the other thing that we did is we do a lot of entrepreneurial training, which are continuing it. We're doing digital training now. How are people going to take their savings? How are people going to come and give it back? Teach them. Google Pay, RuPay, that is for the rupees. Do that because that's the way they'll this thing. So what we found is that the loaning has not started for us in the last 3 months. It's very, very bad for them and bad for us too. But on the other hand, what we did was on the first day of the lockdown, everybody stunned and shocked. And what we did overnight, we got 150 IDs for our staff. We are informal units. We don't have too many IDs. Everywhere there were barriers. Nobody was allowing us, the police, the enforcement. So I sat nearly 1,000 kilometers we work apart. I talked at every district and every provincial level and talked about how our e-passes and mobility should be given, fighting to the Prime Minister's office, fighting to our local governments. And got passed. Once we got our mobility passes, because credit is an essential service. So we were able to help our women with vitamin C, with Ayurveda concoctions, as well as we could also help them with their savings, with their masks, with everything. So that was a very big thing for us, and we connected with them, giving them the awareness, where do you go and what do you do? Now, the other thing I would like to tell you is that this sort of maneuvering we have to do innovatively. There is no doubt. You have to fight it through if you want to keep your institutions alive at that worst times of lockdowns, because every lockdown, the informal sector workers and the formal sector, both of them have suffered during the lockdowns. And right now, we have shoot of 10% of our entrepreneurial growth. Now, in terms of malnourishment, food security, women are the worst sufferers. You got these 5 people sitting in the house now, and they are, doing their online study. Otherwise, the food rations given by the government gave very good rations. So therefore, we were checking it. Check it. Tell your governments to give the rations. Check it at the bottom and write to whoever is concerned, because that's advocacy now. It's not only speaking for me at the webinar internationally, but you've got to do that for the women right there. Now, first of all, they have no incomes. And if they had, like, say, cows, and they had dairy, and they were doing fishing, that was possible. Nobody would stop them. But who's buying? People are getting worried to touch the fish. They're getting worried to do the milk. So you have to look at the stigma question in this also for the entrepreneurs' income to come. Now, after we did all of this, we found that the connection was established with our cooperative members. Then the Union Health Minister invited me to tell me how we were doing this. So I gave him data. When we are talking about data, cooperatives have a lot of data if you're digitalized and you have software. So I gave him data which nobody could give. This is the national consultation. And I told him, sir, we took a 10,000 member review in 3 days by the telephone, by internet and digitally, found that the cities are more affected. There are nothing in villages. That was in May. Today, it is reversing. The migrants are going back and they are giving the corona to their, in the villages too. Then we told him how, so we gave him such vital data that, and Ayurveda. Ayurveda means that we were giving the indigenous products, which is a way of life in India, the turmeric, the ginger, and the holy basil and all of that put together and making it a concoction that was cheap and locally available. So therefore, you see the plant protein and iron were a very, very difficult thing. Now, another thing that I wanted to tell you is that we have been doing, complete writing. Every time the NGOs are not allowed, the cooperatives are not allowed, we are fighting with everybody, with the Home Minister, with the Prime Minister, with anybody. And that is the only way they had response. Nobody was sending responses to them. People were battling. So that gave us a lot of strength, because they started having a nodal officer in each province. Then we could approach them, and so many things. So all I'm saying is, let us look at this pandemic also as an opportunity. You have the Ayurveda that now has perked up everywhere, strengthening women's immunity. They can buy it. That is low cost. Now, I'd like to say, while you're talking about data collection, we have done the first Asia-Pacific data collection many years ago. I did that again 5 years ago. So I think, first of all, do a basic data, gender disaggregated data collection. We're willing to help you. And you tell us exactly, what the first situation of gender is, and pandemic is one. When you're collecting for the pandemic, I'll give you 3 variables that you can collect on. The differential rate of infection by gender, differential income impacts, the incidence of domestic violence, abuse by gender. This would be very useful to you. Now, what are the other variables that you can use in gender data collection? Preventive, curative, nutrition and immunity building strategies, livelihood, credit loan, savings. What is helping them say? How are they getting their savings from you if they can't walk on because of lockdown? Are you digitally training them? Then reproductive and health issues, including medicine, vitamin C, pregnant women, children, sanitation and hygiene, basic needs, grocery. Find out all these details which we have. We have today, because we have microdata for all our members. Then we are also encouraging television and other communication jingles in local languages. Again, English is not our language. So therefore, you have to go locally. Also, street theater, songs on what COVID is and what it's doing to destroy the natural environment, our own lifestyles, and look at it as an opportunity, of course, where you get men to work. Take away the stereotyping and say, you guys work, you're sitting at home too. So the gender stereotyping, take this as an opportunity. Now, what about civil society organizations, cooperatives? We have to forget the divide. We all have to work together, because here is the time that they're also working with people, and we too. Now, also many governments, many parts of the world are not very comfortable with NGOs or co-ops. They're all having problems. So therefore, given that, kindly work with all your other network partners too, because the civil society can be a great strength. In terms of the social impact and economic response, liquidity. If you're running a credit cooperative society, look at liquidity. How are you going to get it? Are you going to get interim loans? Are you going to roll the savings? What exactly are you doing? Then also, the recovery of the government should not come on the backs of women, because very often this happens that only the formal sector is taken care of and the informal sector. You'll have to keep fighting on this. Third is, money should go to women, cash transfers. If they're doing cash transfers going to men, no use. Again, there'll be drunkenness and there'll be wife beating at home. This is something we have to do. The other, now what is the impact of the crisis seriously on women? One is nutrition, food, she's the last to eat, and schooling for children, so everybody is sitting at home. Now, also, you have to look at the humanitarian and citizen response and what she takes care of the elderly. In our traditional societies, the woman has the fourth job of looking after the elderly. Now, you tell the government that wherever sectors that women are overrepresented and or underpaid, such as daily wage earners, small business owners, those working in cleaning, caring, in the informal economy must be targeted, not whatever they think. Who are those people in the decision making who are making the recurrent responses? Make sure, as somebody said, Esther said, though there are hardly any women in any decision making positions, so make sure that they are heard. Write, keep writing. Email is there 10 times, 20 times, because this is a serious crisis. We're going to lose a lot of people. Now, awareness and information, I've said it. Keep communicating and keep communicating through various sources, to very poor women who are not read. Now, why is the impact hitting women hardest? One is the quarantine and lockdowns. 10 days, you have a better business. 10 days, she has no business. All her savings are depleted. There is nothing, there's no food on the table. And she's watching her children, be hungry. The government's rations are not that important. They are not coming in a big way. They are there to feed 3 people, not 10. And many of our families that there are 10. So therefore, I think that they should look at, in quarantines and lockdowns, travel, tourism, restaurants, and food production. These are where our women are, the informal markets and agriculture. So you must make sure that they don't have health insurance, they don't have many other insurance, see that they get some of that. Now, also health and safety, somebody has said, maternal, but also look at the menstruation aspect, also look at the contraception aspect as far as women are concerned. Now, now I'm going to finish off and say hotlines and cooperatives for gender violence started everywhere, every unit, because this is a pandemic more than COVID. So you see in Chile, for example, that there's a whole movement up there of women who are saying that our democratic rights are being subjugated at this time, saying it's COVID. No, be very careful, and you have to assess your own political institutions. So therefore, please influence all your leaders, women, men also. You have so many allies in the moment who can help us. Non-stereotyping of the housework. Get the boys to do it. Get the men to do it. Here's a great opportunity to change this whole thing. So therefore, whenever the countries are having a response plan, get the women into it. Make sure you're on the planning commission, you're on your think tank or whatever, or influence somebody. Women-headed households and the elderly. So I would like to finish by saying, keep my 10 minutes, because as I believe, good soldiers are good leaders. So therefore, I would not like to take any more time. Like to congratulate you. Keep fighting. This is the message from Asia Pacific and the GEC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadine, for that very powerful presentation from the Asia Pacific region. And we really appreciate, and I'm sure people are already noting the questions that they are going to ask. We have the 30 minutes at the end where we are going to interact with the questions. So for the sake of time, I want to move to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Smel Esimu. Dr. Smel is from the International Labour Organization at the head office, and she can add something to the introduction that was given by Dr. Siva. So Dr.
Thank
Smel,
you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Professor Gicheru. Yes, greetings to all from the International Labour Organizations and its cooperatives unit, where we are commemorating our centenary. I'm a Turkish-American feminist economist working on gender equality and women economic empowerment issues for the last 30 years. And I'm a strong believer and advocate for cooperatives and other membership-based organizations for advancing social justice and decent work. Many thanks to the International Cooperative Alliance Regional Office for Africa and WEAFEC for their invitation to us to this virtual event. The unfolding crisis around the pandemic is affecting us all, but not all of us in the same way. Migrants, refugees, marginalized communities, persons with disabilities, workers in the informal economy, and women are among the worst affected. And when gender disparities intersect with these other factors like ethnicity, refugee status, disability, HIV status, both the gender disparities and intra-women inequalities are further exacerbated during these times. The COVID pandemic is hurting women in a number of ways, and I want to highlight 4 of these related to frontline workers, economic hardship, especially in the informal economy, as Dr. Nandini Azad mentioned, care work, and gender-based violence. On the frontline workers, the COVID-19 outbreak has shown how vital it is, the work performed by those providing essential services like healthcare, maintenance of communication, utilities, and emergency services. And healthcare workers, they're working around the clock, and we have 136 million workers in health and social work sectors. Of these, majority at 96 million are women, and they this is around the world. The ILO has rated a number of sectors as being at high risk with respect to COVID-19 job losses and decline in work hours. These include accommodation, food services, transport, tourism, manufacturing, real estate, and wholesale trade. And many women in these high-risk sectors are self-employed or working as micro or small size enterprises with lower levels of capitalization and more reliant on self-financing compared to men. And this is especially true for women in the informal economy. Of these 740 million women in these high-risk sectors, the 740 million are women, and 42% of these are in the high-risk sectors. In the case of, for instance, women home-based workers who produce for global supply chains, especially in textile and apparel, the orders have been suspended from these high-income countries, and we have evidence that indicates of these home-based workers, those who still have some work coming to them, income coming to them, are often members, parts of cooperatives and producer companies. It's important that the government measures in response to the crisis take into account full range of enterprises and organizations and integrate cooperatives and a wider social and solidarity economy into their assistance packages and overall response strategies. This includes social protection provision, especially for resilience building, income and food support, maternity protection, and cooperatives, cooperative insurance, mutual organizations can be critical partners to governments and other actors in this regard. With respect to care work, even without the crisis, caring responsibilities usually fall heavily on women. And before COVID-19, there were 16.4 billion hours spent in unpaid care work every day across the world, with 2/3 being performed by women. During the pandemic, many women and men have seen their hours they devote to unpaid work increase as a consequence of school, daycare closures, reduction in services for people with disabilities, elderly, and not having access to home care workers, domestic workers. Affordable and accessible childcare for parents and those in essential services has come out as a critical need during this time, and dismantling the stereotypes and ideas about the traditional gender roles could also encourage more men and boys to pick up their fair share of unpaid work at home. And financial support for lone parents to assist with childcare, rent payments, other household expenses also can alleviate some of the financial hardship. Gender-based violence was mentioned by Joseph and Nandini Azad. Many women and girls are facing greater violence while confined to their homes as part of COVID control measures. For some, social isolation means being cut off from their social networks, school, family, friends, work, without freedom to call for help, and social isolation can result in limited access to these support networks and services. The ICA Declaration on Decent Work and Against Harassment is a good framework that was adopted in 2018 and can be operationalized in this regard. And as Dr. Nandini has mentioned, measures can be managing emergency hotlines, safe houses, referral services, etc. So I want to just briefly reflect on, in this context, what do we expect of cooperatives? Yes, we know a cooperative model is well suited to advancing women's economic participation, increasing access to employment, to overcome economic exclusion, services like finance, care, skills, training, and boosting the economic participation, leadership, management experience, etc. We've seen that women workers and entrepreneurs in the informal economy often choose cooperatives and other membership-based associations to improve their livelihoods, to enhance their access to goods and markets, for instance, with street vendors, market traders across the continent, South Africa, Kenya. And these cooperatives have come through for their members during the pandemic, raising funds, ensuring market access for products and services, disseminating protective equipment, information, and advocating with public and private entities for their members. And women-only cooperatives we see especially relevant in gender-segregated contexts. For instance, in Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, in a number of areas, value-added food processing, crafts, and care provision. In the care service provision, cooperatives predominantly have women as founders, members, beneficiaries, and workers. Home care workers, domestic workers, social workers, community health workers. Cooperatives are actually important providers in addition to other public-private providers. And it is important to build in rebuilding resilience after COVID-19 for future waves and other pandemics, that the need for care services is not forgotten, and cooperatives are also considered as an option in care provision in health and care. We have, as ILO, a collaboration with International Health Cooperative Organization in Kenya and Cameroon around activating existing cooperatives in agriculture, finance, to expand into health and care services provision. We can also imagine and think of cooperatives as innovative solutions during COVID and beyond. Worker cooperatives around young graduates in cultural and creative sectors, music, theater, fashion, graphic design. Platform cooperatives in technology sector, and with freelancers using online applications to improve also outreach of cooperatives. There's a great deal of innovation in the continent on technology, and combined with social innovation of cooperatives, this can catapult forward platform cooperatives in the region. Among women migrants and refugees, cooperatives can be a source of livelihoods and improved resilience. We've seen this in the Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, Libya, and other countries in the continent. And producer cooperatives and value-added cooperatives of women and men have been innovating in getting their members' products to markets and consumers, like through direct marketing. And in this regard, I'd like to mention a collaboration with ICA-Africa around cooperative trade as an area of innovation that can bring producers and consumers together in shorter and fairer supply chains. Women are among, of course, the majority of users and among financial cooperatives, saving and credit unions, and these have been mobilized during the crisis for their members and wider communities. The pandemic shows us that how we can really build back better. There is much to be learned from the experiences of cooperatives from previous crises where they have stepped up to the challenge. The trick is that we don't dismiss cooperatives and solidarity membership-based organizations as just crisis time institutions, but integrate them beyond in rebuilding our economies and for resilience toward future crises. So I think one thing that we've learned from this crisis is that there's a recognition for investing in a diversity of business models beyond those that are purely profit maximization oriented, like shareholder models. So I think here we need to push the cooperative model forward as a model that reconciles social and economic goals, as well as social and environmental goals, as well as economic ones. And we really need to push education and training systems in the continent and the world to help women in rural informal economies, young graduates, wider public to learn about cooperatives, how to start and build and maintain cooperatives. Responses also to the pandemic have demonstrated the value of localized community level actions. And again, cooperatives are critical community-based institutions that can strengthen local community resilience. As the UN agency with a mandate for social justice and decent work, ILO has had a long-standing commitment to promoting cooperatives and women empowerment. Our work around policy advocacy, development cooperation, research, training, and communication are available for women's and cooperative movement alike from the ILO Co-op. Our website is www.ilo.org/COOP co-op, and we work with WeAffect in the use of and dissemination of these tools, and we look forward to our continued collaboration with ICA-Africa and WeAffect in advancing cooperatives for resilience to crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smell, for that very powerful, again, presentation, and very informative about the work that you are doing. So like we said, we expect to respond to the questions, but as we wait for the final session for questions and answers, which is about between 4 and 4:30, I want to encourage the presenters, as the presentations are going on, if you check on the chat group, you will see the questions that relate to your topic, and you can start answering them even on the same forum, so that we only be left with the time to talk about what we may not be able to manage as the sessions go on. So speakers, please check and see what is coming up for you. So our next speaker is Monica. Monica is the Executive Director, National Association of Women's Organization in Uganda. And Monica, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Professor. I would like to thank the previous speakers for the very good presentations that they have made. I am Monica Emiru Enyow, the Executive Director of National Association of Women's Organizations in Uganda. I am passionate about the rights of women, but also the rights of children, because where there are women, there are always children. And I have an interest in institutional development and institutional growth. We are one of the partners in the WeAffect partnership, working with cooperatives, mainstreaming gender in the work of cooperatives. We've been working with WeAffect since 2014. At the moment, we are providing support on gender mainstreaming in 4 cooperatives, 2 agricultural cooperatives and 2 housing cooperatives. COVID-19 is a challenge, but at the same time, I think it's an opportunity, because it has made us realize things that we wouldn't have probably gotten to know about and developed innovative ways of addressing them. So while it has been a very big challenge, we shouldn't dwell on the challenges. We should start looking forward and saying, how then do we address ourselves in this situation? When we talk about the effect of COVID-19, how it has affected women in cooperatives, I will use Uganda mostly because my work is in Uganda. We have women in cooperatives in agriculture, mainly horticulture, poultry, food processing, as well as service industries such as tailoring, knitting, and eating houses. With the COVID-19 and the lockdown, we saw increased inability to move to farms. Some of the women, because of difficulty of access to land, either have land very far away from their homes, or they actually hire land a bit far from home, and they need to move to those places of work. So there was a challenge in terms of movement. There was also a challenge in terms of accessing inputs like seed for their farms. And all this has affected food production. In terms of food for the family, because women still have to provide food for the family, but also in terms of income. We have, while the women produce, there are also women who are engaged in selling of the products. And we saw markets operating at about 30% capacity because there was need to have few people in the market. So the government organized in such a way that about 30% of people were only, of sellers were in the market. In some markets, it was on rotation. Every week, another group came in, but some markets, there were just a few people who were selected, and these were men and women. So we also saw lower sales and we saw lower incomes, and yet children are at home. So it means also providing more food, and many times it's the woman who is responsible for providing food. While the markets were open, there was a challenge of transport. Curfew was instituted starting at 7 p.m. So many women ended up staying in the market because if there is no motorized transport to take you home and you're closing your stall at probably 3 or 4, you might not be able to walk to your house. And we noted the challenge of inadequate facilities for women in terms of water and sanitation, where they can access toilet and bathrooms. So that is something that we have also noted in our markets. The previous speakers have talked about gender-based violence. It was on the increase, fueled by stress and inadequate resources. And some of the women who opted to stay in the market, sell and bank their money, some of them was actually due to the fact that there was gender-based violence at home, and they feared to take the money home because that would be the cause of gender-based violence. In the service industry, with the shopping places closed, their workplaces were closed, the eating houses were closed, so there was no business, and women lost money. And even as they were losing money, the owners of the buildings were charging them rent, taxes are still being demanded, and yet also the cost of living has gone high. Schools were closed, schools are still closed. And we have cooperatives that are producing uniforms. Now, from the relationship that we've had with We Effect and the cooperative partners in We Effect, we as the National Association of Women have also started forming cooperatives. We initially were working with women in groups, but now those women groups are converting themselves into cooperatives. And we have cooperative societies of women living with disabilities who are in the tailoring industry, mainly producing uniforms for school, both clothing and all clothing. They do tailoring and knitting for producing sweaters. So right now, they also don't have market for their products. So you see that women, the kind of businesses that women are in are the ones that have been affected most. In terms of policy responses, policy and programming, as a country, we are very good at ratifying international commitments. We also have very good policies, gender responsive policies, and we have quite excellent gender responsive legislation. I think our biggest challenge is translating policy into programs that are gender responsive, that see the involvement of women at all levels, so that whatever decisions are being made, whatever programs are happening, women actually have a say in what is happening. For example, government provided food. There were food rations for mainly the city, but the food rationing was very haphazard, with mainly the local leaders going into the communities and distributing food. Sometimes some families got, some families did not get. There was no data to indicate which family had more need, which family had more children. And sometimes families that had more children or that were women headed actually ended up missing the food. So in terms of translation of policy into action, some of the challenges that need to be addressed issues like the support that government has promised business people. What kind of businesses is government looking at? Most of the time, it's the big businesses that the focus is going to be on. What about cooperatives? Cooperatives are businesses. The small businesses that women are doing in terms of tailoring, those two are businesses. So there's need to see that there's gender responsiveness, even in planning how government is going to support businesses. Also for continued social assistance, we need to see government and other actors who are providing social assistance, making sure that these are targeted. And how can this be targeted? I think that we need to conduct a comprehensive study or a documentation of the effects of COVID-19 on all the sectors, including the economic sector, and specifically looking at cooperatives that are now growing in Uganda again, and to see how we can have a strong gender assessment in terms of those effects. That will help us to be able to design interventions that are gender responsive, that are satisfying everybody. While the lockdown was going on and at the peak of COVID-19, although Uganda has had only positive cases at the moment, we don't have any deaths. And also in terms of care, the health sector took care of all the care such that women were not highly burdened with care of COVID-19 patients. But there are a number of areas that we have learnings and we need to replicate from those innovations. Because of inadequate access to market, women could not sell their products. A certain group of women started selling products online. They were advertising themselves. They had motorcycles to deliver the food with phone numbers. So you only had to send a list with the prices as well. So you only had to send a list of products that you wanted, and then they would be delivered to you. And in that way, they were able to overcome the challenge of products at home, especially food that is perishable, that is going to rot. They were able to sell them, but at the same time, they were able to raise income at the difficult time when COVID-19 was subsisting. They had large families to feed, and there was no access to market. So that is something that we need to learn from. How do we acquire those gadgets that people can use to be able to sell their products online? I know that many people can use the phones, but probably there's need for better management of the information, and that might need computers. But also in our communities, we have a challenge of electricity and then access to internet. Most of the women that we work with are based in the communities. So it's an area that we need to work on. It's an area that we need to lobby government for, so that people can actually begin to work online. Because with COVID-19, it looks like working online is going to be the in thing. There was increased roadside trade, and that's when we realized that, again, there are no spaces where women can sell their products by the roadside. I think it's also an area that we need to lobby, and we need to work towards to have points where women can actually have their products by the roadside. We saw women sitting in the sun the whole day, trying to sell their products. And when there was rain, then they had to run away and leave the markets. I think there's need to open more outlets so that women can actually have access to sell their products, such that planning is targeting women as well. Yes, we have these centered markets, but it's not adequate. In Rwanda, for example, we have grocery stores that the government has allocated to women cooperative societies to be able to deliver their products and that are sold in that place. In many countries, especially Uganda, where I'm speaking from, the grocery stores, or what we call the supermarkets, find their products from whatever source they know best, which most of the time disadvantages women, because they do not have that exposure that links them with these supermarkets. So I think it is the duty of the Ministry of Trade and Cooperatives, but also other actors, to lobby so that women can have access to the market, especially as we continue with the challenging times. And for any other epidemic that might arise, we need to be able to make sure that women are gaining from cooperatives, they are producing and they are gaining. Because when they don't gain, then they will not see the benefit of being in cooperatives. Another thing that we learn from and that we need to see growing is a response to gender-based violence. During lockdown, we worked in a more integrated manner than ever before. The cooperatives, together with NGOs, and not just women's NGOs, but also other NGOs. For example, in most of the regions, we were working with legal service providers to be able to respond to gender-based violence, organizations that are providing mediation to deal with family disputes, but also to respond to sexual violence, especially among the young people. Very many children were experiencing sexual violence. And we saw ourselves working more closely as actors, as NGOs, but also together with government. Some local governments were very good in terms of working together, as well as even in messaging on GBV and combined with messaging on COVID-19. So for me, that makes me believe that while COVID-19 has been a big challenge and continues to be a big challenge, it is an opportunity for us to learn from what we have been doing as NGOs working with cooperatives, what the cooperatives have been doing, as well as what we have been doing together with other actors. One thing that is growing in Uganda is what the cooperatives forming a network that under the leadership of Uhuru Institute of Social Development, there's what we call Cooperatives 360, COP 360. It brings together the various actors, the various cooperative societies, the marketing cooperative societies, the financing, the producers. That is something that is very helpful and that we should expand in Uganda, but also share with other actors within the region. Because if we have cooperatives that are providing finances, enabling cooperators to borrow, and particularly women cooperators to borrow, and then they are also working towards marketing, such that even if you are in the farthest part of the country, you have access to market. Then you have access to information in various ways. I think that kind of network, if we could continue to build it, is also an opportunity that we can use in terms of financing in the face of COVID-19, in terms of marketing in the face of COVID-19, in terms of sharing information in the face of COVID-19. So I think for me, in terms of responses, that is what I would love to say from what I've shared in terms of our learning and some of the things that the women were able to do during the lockdown. I will stop there for now and maybe come in again at the time of responding to questions. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Okay, thank you very much, Monica Emilu from Uganda. I think your presentation is very informative and we have learned quite a lot, and I know the participants are going to interact with you more as we go towards the end of the question and answer time. I want to continue encouraging you, the presenters, to keep checking on the chat so that if there is any question that is related to your presentation, you can respond to it on the same chat so that we minimize the answers we shall give at the end. So I want now at this juncture to invite the next speaker. And our next speaker is Masejero from Cusco, who is the advocacy manager in Cusco. So Masejero, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I call you my mentor and peer in this cooperative space. Thank you, Dr. Sifa. My longtime partners, we effect. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with the team. It is good afternoon and good morning, whatever the case may be for the participants. I want to introduce myself. Of course, I've been introduced. Just to say that, as you have been told, I am the Advocacy Manager, Cusco Limited. Cusco is Kenya Union of Savings and Credit Cooperative Union. It is the umbrella body for SACCOs in Kenya. I have a wealth of experience in the cooperative management, leadership and governance policy. And as Dr. Sifa said, of course, in the matter of agricultural cooperatives, I've been there for quite a while. So we will interact. Matters gender are also dear to my heart. And for this particular time, we are going to interact in understanding the importance of the use of data to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on women and girls. So we can move to the next slide. So thank you. I welcome you to this presentation on understanding the impact, the importance of use of data to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on women and girls. And I will start by saying that the global health pandemic has caused various challenges, including social and economic. And while statistics show that more men are being infected with the virus compared to women, data from the World Health Organization shows that women may be at risk of exposure due to the occupation gender segregation. And then globally, women make up 70% of the health workforce and are more likely to be frontline health workers, especially nurses, midwives, community health workers. They are also the majority of health facility service staff, such as cleaners, road catering, and as such, they are more likely to be exposed to the virus. Women are also more likely to be caregivers to the COVID-19 patients. And this we have seen. The statistics that we are being given every other day, we are being told that men are more vulnerable, or they are the most in numbers, according to the statistics that we are being given. But we know very well that at the front line, the health workers are the ones, most of them are women who are health workers. And therefore, in terms of the gender, you can see that the most vulnerable are more women. They are the ones that are the front line. Let's move to the next one. So when we look at the economic hardships due to COVID, it is also greater for women, according to a World Bank report. Informal workers, most of whom are women, account for more than 90% of the labor force in sub-Saharan Africa. Informal sector jobs are particularly at risk during the pandemic. And even here, in the case for Kenya, we have seen that the informal sectors of cooperatives sector, the cooperatives that were formed by the skilled and unskilled labor force are the ones that went under first. The Juakari sector, they were the first to go to fold. And those are the circles that have been affected very at most. Even though such others like the airlines have also folded and they have also closed. So we have seen that those in the informal sector jobs have really been affected. Health pandemics can make it more difficult for women and girls to receive treatment and health services. This is compounded by multiple intersecting inequalities such as ethnicity, socioeconomic status, disability, age, race, geographical location, among others, which influence access and decision-making to critical health services and information about COVID-19. We are told that this time round, even some people are are not even going to the hospital for the fear that they are going to test for COVID-19, test positive for COVID-19. So the stigma that comes even with COVID-19 is making people not to go to the hospitals, even for normal ailments. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Why we need data? Many low-income countries are not prioritizing data, especially on women and girls. Data is needed to track infection rates and progress made in treating the patients during the pandemic. Gender data is necessary for a gender-sensitive response to COVID-19. Data helps to alleviate the immediate health crisis by understanding the need and appropriating the required resources. Gender data is necessary for governments to design comprehensive and gender-sensitive social and economic policy responses to the global pandemic. At this time when we are having this pandemic, we have seen our health minister or the health staff, every other day they are giving the reports of the infection rate cases, and they are giving in terms of the data. I mean, in terms of the gender, how many people have been affected in terms of the men and women, how many people have been affected in terms of the age, whether they are infants, the brackets of the youth, the old, the young. We have seen that happening, but we need this information in terms of then, if it is in the cooperative movement, we have not been able to capture how many people in terms of cooperatives have been affected, because it is in the generalities of the larger population of the nation that have been captured. Data is important for crafting policy measures to mitigate the long-term impacts of the pandemic on the women's livelihoods and well-being. Data can identify patterns and issues that need further measurements. Data is needed for consistent, measurable statistics to help the government in decision-making. In this regard, it is crucial that gender data remain a priority commitment commitment for the global community, both before and after the current outbreak. I think this is a lesson that we are also running as a cooperative movement, that we are going to have a way of capturing this information, whether it is a research that we are going to conduct or not. I mean, not really whether we have a choice, but we need to have a way of conducting a research to find out the impact on the cooperative movement. Let's move to the next one. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what has, previous one? What has the cooperative movement done? I should have mentioned that I am a member of a cooperative COVID response committee that is responding to the issues to do with the COVID-19 issues within the cooperative movement. This is a committee that is mobilizing funds within the cooperative movement so that we can give some COVID kits to the vulnerable or those who have been affected. And so far, it was started by the ministry, the State Department of Cooperatives. The commissioner is the chairman of the committee. He's the one who started it within the ministry. And so far, a total of 5,000 households which have benefited, which is about 100%, but 100% of these, 80% of them is part of it is 80% of the cooperative as beneficiaries, but 20% has gone to the general population. That means that the COVID kits, 80% beneficiaries are from the cooperative movement, but 20% have gone to the other general population. And out of these people, if we look at it, 70% of the beneficiaries were women and 29% were men, the ones who received the kit. This indicates that the most affected are the women, or women were heading these families within this area that was targeted, especially the Kamkuji sub-county within Nairobi. This means that it means that most of the households that were given the COP kits that we have been giving were generally headed by women. And even if they were handed by men, surely I'm sure they were all beneficiaries were women by extent. Let's go to the next one, the next trend. So when we look at the data collection approaches, or how do we go about it, to understand gender issues experienced during the pandemic, it is necessary to collect both qualitative and quantitative data. For qualitative data, online surveys and questionnaires can be administered via telephone. Qualitative data can be collected through telephone or face-to-face interviews, participatory videos, focus groups, and storytelling techniques. Qualitative data is especially important by speaking to women to understand how they have been affected by the pandemic. Qualitative data range to the discovery that women were going through gender-based violence, and I'm glad that many of the speakers this afternoon have talked about this because it is a common problem that cuts across the region. Women who were single parents had lost jobs. Migrant women were sleeping on the streets after being kicked out by the landlord, amongst other issues. This is a reality. This is what is happening and has happened. While conducting the research, it is important to design privacy policies for the women you intend to collect information from. One can use a random sample size of targeting women based on specific demographics, for instance, location, income, age, etc. It is important to do mapping to find out where these women are. Technological tools that can be used include the USSD codes, WhatsApp, and Facebook. Let's move to the next one. Then, in conclusion, we can say that a pandemic amplifies and heightens all existing inequalities, which in turn shape who is affected, the severity of the impact, and our efforts at recovery. Putting women and girls at the center of the economies will fundamentally drive better and more sustainable development. Now, under all this, in terms of the data and what we have learned and what we have seen, and especially in the COVID response committee, is that we need to carry out a survey that needs to tell us what is the impact of the COVID in terms of as a pandemic in the cooperative movement. But we are yet to find out who is going to refund this initiative, because it is going to be expensive. And if it is not going to be expensive, then how best can we carry it out in the most cost-effective way? And I want to believe this can be an area where partners like We Effect can come in handy in finding out the best way that can be done in areas of the cooperative. So thank you very much, and back to you, Madam Moderator. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Madam Mase, for that very clear presentation on what is happening in Kenya and your involvement in the COVID-19 Response Committee. I think it has been very educative for us to learn even how we can develop strategies of approaching this situation. Yeah, so again, check whether there are any questions related to you and you can start answering them. I want to invite our next speaker, and thank you, Master, for keeping to time despite the challenges when you are starting. Yeah, you have done well. So we go to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Neema Grace Mutemi. Grace is an expert on social media, and probably she will educate us more on how the use of social media can be useful in response to the issues that are with us, and probably so as how women can make use of the social media. Yes, Grace?
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you for the organizers. I think I have been given rights to share my screen. Yes, thank you very much for that introduction. And I also thank Dr. Chioge for a very humbling presentation. I got baptized into the cooperative world around 2014 when I was engaged to publish a book by Honorable Joseph Nyaga. So I'm very happy to see that the movement has continued to be really forward thinking. And I'll just quote, I'll quote Dr. Azad. This is the first, if this is the first region in the cooperative world to host such a discussion, that just tells you that we are doing something right. We are thinking about where the cooperative movement should be responding to, even before it is required. And I think this conversation is going to become mandatory for most regions in the world, and not just for cooperatives, for everyone. So thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this conversation. So by way of a proper introduction, just in a little bit in addition to what has been said already, and I've started timing myself, I'd like to say that the area of communication that I specialize in has to do with public affairs and what we call behavior economics. So we have talked about, you know, different issues when it comes to gender and COVID-19, but my specialization is interested in looking at, with all the data, the information that we have, how can we use that to influence how we communicate so that we can have impact. So just until June, I was consulting for the Ministry of Agriculture. I can see it's also one of the most responsive ministries, given that Marcia has just talked about the State Department of Cooperatives already congregating, and I was part of a team that was looking at how to properly position. So I'll use a few examples from what has happened there, and I'm happy to hear nutrition coming up once and again, but it's about looking at what is impacting the community and how we can use communication tools to address that. So why should cooperatives care about social media? So allow me first to take a step back, forget about women for a minute, so that we look at the cooperative movement holistically and why social media and other digital tools. A survey in 2017 actually looked at what is actually giving results in terms of digital communication and marketing specifically. And as you can see, 28% shows that the most gains in the spend of money that you actually pay for marketing, influencer marketing, and I'll talk a little bit about influencers, was seen to pay more than organic search. You know, when people just go to Google and they search, where is my cooperative? What is the nearest cooperative near me? Or where should I, who should I call if I've been attacked by my husband? That is organic. Influencer marketing is when someone who has a wide following is talking about that topic and therefore has an impact of reaching more people. So when you look at those metrics, you'll find that social media allows for democracy. And I'll quickly add a caveat here, because democracy in this sense will not be one member, one vote, because as many of you might have experienced, in the world of social media, one person might have more votes in terms of influence and impact that they can have. If they retweet or if they say something negative, they can influence a lot more people. So in not democracy in that sense, but democracy in terms of reallocating power to people who were disenfranchised. And this conversation today is looking at women particularly and how they've been disenfranchised before COVID and also now during the pandemic phase, and as well as youth. We're looking at how social media influences public opinion, and hence, because of the public opinion swaying one way or the other, how it is able to move government policy and business decision and influence that. So giving power to a vast majority that did not hitherto have a voice or access to influencing policy, that in that sense, you can see the impact of social media. And social media also has little to no barriers. Well, I know that computers are not widely accessible still, especially in the African context, as well as power, internet, what we have talked about. In fact, someone was just breaking it down to us previously and saying in Kenya today, young people have to make the decision between buying Bamba 20 or Bamba 50. Bamba 50 is like the one of the scratch. A mobile scratch service, so that you can be able to get data. You have to choose between having a meal and having internet, because access to internet has become almost a basic need, especially because of restriction to movement. And below here, allow me to share some data from an InfraTrack research that was done, I believe this was early June or late May. And this was specifically looking at COVID and what Kenyans care about in terms of the pandemic. What should the Kenyan government focus on? So 47% of the respondents said that the government should focus more and invest even more than it is already doing in controlling the outbreak of COVID-19. But very closely at number 2 was food security. A lot of people are worried about either not affording food or not having access to the right kind of food that they need. And especially if you're going to continue having a lot of community transmission and therefore community response, because hospitals are now getting overwhelmed, then 35% are very interested in the government doing more to solve the unemployment crisis. In Kenya alone, it was predicted that at least 500,000 jobs, 500,000 jobs were going to cease to exist within the first 3 months of COVID. I'm yet to get the figures right now. So that is an area that most Kenyans are very, very sensitive about. Then infrastructure, of course, the question of power and access to internet, is an infrastructure issue. Roads, so that people can quickly get to where they need to go and get home before curfew. That's also an infrastructure issue. So how much is being spent there? Then healthcare, because again, COVID is a healthcare issue, so, but you can see how healthcare is coming, at number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at number 5. Can you see how, the public perception is there? And then clean water, regardless of, the emphasis that we put in terms of hand washing, and then high cost of living, of course, comes at 16%, and then education. Last, of course, there are many other things, but I just picked the top that I wanted to talk about in this presentation, because I believe the cooperative movements have a lot to do with most of these issues. The cooperative movements can help, and I was glad to hear from ILO how already there are discussions to see how even agriculture and farmer cooperatives can be used to address the issue of healthcare access, used to even address some issues like even access to PPEs. You've seen a lot of women going into manufacturing business. So how can this be scaled up so that they're meeting the protocols and guidelines and getting access to market in a more organized way? So this was just a little slide that I wanted to introduce this topic in, and probably give you something to think about as we continue with this conversation. What do we measure when you talk about influence? Remember, I had just started by saying we want to track influencer marketing, because that's what is going to make people know what you're doing and help to, especially for women, to access markets, etc. We look at engagement, we look at reach, we look at the leads, we look at conversion, and then impact. So engagement, of course, it's obvious, the number of likes, etc., shares, and how, the conversation begins to gain traction. Number 2 is reach, in terms of how far the message goes. So if we begin a conversation today, and then very quickly India is talking about it because there was someone on the panel, from India, and that gains momentum globally, that is a very good thing. Then leads, how many fans or followers, actually interested in the topic? People who wouldn't ordinarily be speaking about that conversation. If we're talking about the unpaid labor, women taking care of the sick during the COVID-19 and that not being costed or compensated, how quickly does this conversation then reach parliament in a particular country and therefore lead into a conversation? So that is something that is measurable as well. Then conversion, how many local followers are actually gained on topics that have been discussed? So other than that, we're looking at WeEffect, ICA, how many followers do you get from this webinar, that grow your numbers. And then lastly, actual impact, behavior change, policy change, election outcomes, actual tangible results. That has to be measurable. Otherwise, communication, is not just communication for communication's sake. It has to lead to a contribution. So are you able to see my screen now? The social media influencers. I picked 2 examples of some of the best influencers we have right now, Pope Francis and Kim Kardashian. Of course, they have very different spheres of influence and following. But when you look at who a social media influencer is, an individual who has the power to affect purchase decision of others because of the authority, knowledge, position, relationship, or an individual who has following in a particular niche area. So when you look at these 2 very different and contrast examples, you can begin to ask yourself questions of why does Pope Francis, have quite a wide following, almost the same following as Kim Kardashian. They might be very different, but then what is it that they're doing in their social media behavior that makes them have such a significant reach? So in the measuring of and the metrics of social media influence, we use what is called as the big 5 personality traits to measure how to look at the efficiency and the effectiveness of a social media influencer, and also how to grow one. The beauty about social media is it's not that you're born with just one. A bit different from what your personality is that you're born in with. For your online personality, it's something that you can craft and learn and sort of project to be able to advance your cause. And I'm sorry to use the 2 examples that are men and not women, and that's something we need to talk about. How can we have women representing the higher percentage of cooperative movements in terms of membership, but then we are not very quick to translate our being social in real life and our network to gain us impact when it comes to our digital behavior. That is something men do a little more differently, because they're able to sort of leverage the reach and the network that they have in real life into their social media personas and their reach online. So we look at personalities, the personality traits of openness, you'll forgive me here, my pronunciation. So consciousness. Sorry for that. Agreeableness, introversion, or extroversion. So if you look at the metrics, the personality metrics for Pope Francis, and this is my friend, Chris Orwa, who's also a social media influencer in the Kenyan sphere, especially on Twitter, then you will see the differences. When you come to emotional range, you see the differences in terms of Pope Francis, who is agreeable and almost a universal figure. Everybody sort of agrees with him and where that reaches. But then when it comes to emotional range, just 16%. But then when you look at yourself, how open are you on social media? Do you show empathy? Do you show connectedness? Like what is it that you're talking about? Are you talking about if someone has passed on and that was a national figure, are you using that as a conversation starter so that you can talk about the important things? I think we can just continue. So the other thing we do is measuring the message. And I work with a brilliant team of data scientists who are able to measure your acceptability as a social media user or influencer online, the language that you use, but also the message. So when you're looking at message, and this is something that I picked off, agricultural topics, because I've spent quite a lot of time over the last 7 years in the agricultural sector. But we can do the same thing to measure, women and gender-based violence. We can use the same thing to measure women access to capital and finance, or even women in leadership positions in cooperatives, and sort of see when people are talking online, what range of emotions do they emit. So if a certain topic is bringing a lot of joy and is analytical, that's a very good thing. The analytical more than the joy, because it means people are open to engage in that topic. They want to talk more, they're contributing different, a variety of views on that, and that's what you want. But you really don't want to have a lot of sadness, a lot of fear, in those topics, because when that happens, it means that people are panicking, people are afraid of. But what does that mean to you, who is a leader, or who is a woman who wants to take advantage of that to build your profile? Tackle the issues that are bringing fear, because people are willing to listen more, are willing to hear an expert opinion. And as I'll show you in the next one, some of the important things to note is that people trust individuals more than they trust corporate accounts. So we have WeEffect, we have ICA, we have Cusco, we have, Coop University as corporate accounts. People are not going to be very analytical engaging with those, because they know that that is a staged front. They know that someone has been hired to sort of communicate a very controlled message. But they're very happy to engage, Professor personally on her own personal Twitter handle. They're happy to engage, Sifa, because they know that's a human being. And once they're tagged, they will respond, or they have a responsibility to respond. And therefore, they trust more the messages that come from the individuals who lead that. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we need to position the women within our institutions to be social media influencers. And that's something we need to work on, so that we grow their reach. Because when you grow their reach, then you actually drive numbers back to the corporate accounts and the institutions and the causes that they follow. Make sure that we are engaging people. So don't start a conversation and then go switch off, and people are asking questions, they're not getting any response, because that puts people off. And influencers are made. Now we're beginning to see a trend. We were very addicted to using celebrities and people who have been known in the TV and advertising world more than we were using normal people. But what we are seeing now, trends are that governments are being overturned by people no one even knew their names. You're beginning to see patterns of investment by even businesses being driven, sporadically by Generation X's and millennials. So I think it's something that we can work on. I'm very happy to work with ICA-ILO to even develop some metrics based on this webinar that we can begin measuring, so that we can see what topics women in the cooperative movement need to begin driving, so that we can begin having impact on this. I think that's the end of my conversation.
Can you move faster because of you conclude because of the time?
I've actually finished. That was the end of my conversation. Okay. Yes, and I'm again very grateful for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Grace Mutemi, for that very informative conversation. And I think it's going to go a long way in enlightening us as we move forward in the cooperative sector. So I want to now move forward, and again, you can also be checking on the questions that you may be able to answer as we go on. So I want us to move to the next phase of our presentations, and we have two case studies. We have the first one, a case study from the Uganda Housing Cooperative Union, And I would like to ask Fiona Nasemelirwe to make a presentation. Please let us stick to 10 minutes so that we are able to finish this forum together. It's very interesting, and it's good that we don't keep too long until some people leave us behind. So Fiona, please take the floor.
Thank you, Doctor. So my name is Fiona Shemerire Kabwama. I am the General Manager of Uganda Housing Cooperative Union. We are a member-based union. We have 32 primary housing cooperatives so far, and we were formed in 2013 as an apex body. We have over 1,320 primary housing cooperatives individuals who are members of the housing cooperatives, and 53.6% of these are women. We are so grateful to WeEffect, who has been supporting the union since it started in 2013 till today, to mobilize and revive housing cooperatives in Uganda. So I'll go straight to today's topic. I was asked to present the implication of COVID, what implication COVID has had on gender equality within the housing cooperatives in Uganda, and also make recommendations for action. So I'll start by showing you what the union has done in integrating gender equality. We have a gender policy to guide the union and key stakeholders in gender mainstreaming. And our ultimate goal is to achieve gender equality in all primary housing cooperatives. I saw a question earlier on asking what cooperatives are, and none of the previous speakers has cared to explain. But cooperatives are there are people or groups of people who come together with the same agenda to pool their resources together to achieve a similar goal. For instance, primary housing, on the housing side, housing cooperatives form basically to provide themselves with better housing or better living condition, or improve their living conditions around the house. And we all know that during COVID, this COVID pandemic, housing has been at the center because the conditions or the parameters that have been placed to control or curb its spread, one of them has been stay at home, maintain social distancing, observe hygiene, which is hand washing, which means that someone has to have access to water in the first place, and also have somewhere to stay in the first place. So this issue touches upon us in quite intimately as housing cooperatives. The other measure we have taken in place to integrate gender equality in the union is to ensure we have more women in leadership positions, at least a third. We have gender focal persons in every housing cooperative who looks out for any issues that may arise in their community. We also have model couples who support women participation in cooperative activities. We have trainers of trainers who are looking at gender-based violence referral pathways. And also we have been supporting income generating projects within housing cooperatives, especially for women housing cooperatives. So looking at the COVID-19 situation in Uganda, we conducted a research in partnership with National Association of Women Organizations in Uganda, MONICA. And we were able, through this research, we looked at, it was because of the situation, we were unable to do focus group discussions or go down to the community physically. So we worked together with our gender focal persons within the communities to collect data. We developed an emergency data collection tool to guide the data collection process. And the tool explored the impact of COVID-19 on both women and men in primary housing cooperatives and communities there where they are, as well as other vulnerable groups such as children in 3 districts of Uganda. And this is what is forming our case study today. So these 3 districts that were chosen were mainly the high-risk areas in Uganda. They were considered high-risk areas, and these include Kampala, Buikwe, and Wakiso. And so what we came out of that research was the challenges that we discovered was 1, access to food, As the data showed, women were supporting their families using their village savings and loan association membership, and also savings and credit cooperative savings, and also using their urban farming activities that they had already been doing within their homes. Then we also discovered that there has been increased mortality among women and children. We had a case here in Kampala where, because of the lockdown, there was no public transport had been closed, and therefore people could not easily access, unless to move you had to get permission from our resident district commissioners. And so this was a challenge, particularly for expectant mothers. In one of our housing cooperatives, 3 expectant mothers were supported by connecting them to that whole system of contacting the RDC and then getting transport to the hospital. But by the time the 3 made it to hospital, one of them had lost their child because of this challenge of transport. So we see a direct impact on women and especially expectant mothers during this time. We also, from the findings, discovered there's increased women's burden of care, both at home and in the community, because of closure of schools and businesses, which meant that women had to spend more time looking after children and household members. Yet this would have been used for doing other work that would bring in money or income to their homes. And then we also saw that in terms of income and livelihood, businesses that employed women, like salons, restaurants, boutiques, arcades, had been closed, and only factories and motorcycle riders had been left operating, which meant that many women lost their income and livelihood sources. We also saw a challenge in access to water. Women, from the research, it was reported that there's the greater and more frequent demand for water meant that women had to spend more time fetching water during the lockdown. This is especially for the rural areas where we have cooperatives. And then there's also difficulty in accessing agricultural inputs. One of our members said they had to move around 5 kilometers to buy inputs like seeds and fertilizers. And yet there was also curfew, which means that you have to put in perspective the time to go and buy such things and then the time to come back. So this affected, and yet this pandemic occurred during the planting season. Then we also saw a challenge of access to health services, where women reported unplanned pregnancies due to the rise, due to the time, spending more time as couples in their homes. And so there was a lot of a rise in, and also in access to family planning services led to a rise in women pregnancies. And then there's also a challenge of access to information, because, you know, most of the information about the pandemic was sent out through social media, which requires someone to have a smartphone or television or radio. And in some of these places, in the remote areas, there's no access to these kind of gadgets. But also, for women especially, most of them had to depend on the men who could move, because the women are stuck at home looking after the family. Then also savings, especially for housing. All housing cooperatives within our union, for instance, suspended saving for housing because they needed to cover other basic needs like food, hygiene, medical care. And then we also saw an increase. Someone else had talked about this. There's been an increase in the gender-based violence. 5,000 cases were reported just between March and April of 2020. We have had 5,000 gender-based violence cases being reported. And this has mainly arisen due to the pressure from the family to cater for, pressure on men to cater for family needs, and yet they do not have income sources. And then some gender-based violence referral pathways were not operational during the lockdown. But then one of the biggest among the challenges for us has been eviction threats due to failure to pay rent during the lockdown. And as we know that when a family is evicted, the people who suffer most are the women and the children. And so this came out as one of the issues that the cooperatives have had to deal with. So the strategies, I'll go to the strategies now that we have so far put in place to address the above challenges. One is cooperatives are being encouraged to diversify their income sources through urban farming, especially for the cooperatives within the urban areas, such as producing mushrooms and vegetables within for their home consumption, and also producing locally made masks and liquid soap, which are selling at the moment. And then through our gender focal persons, we have had members trying to attend or support those people who are close to them who are facing gender-based violence cases by trying to be go-betweens and mediate in situations where they're not able to refer them to the right channels. We have also professional teachers, because in Uganda schools were locked down. So we have had teachers who are within our cooperatives trying to give education to children to ease the burden on homes and families where because of the large number of children, there's tension, and therefore this can result in gender-based violence. So we have had teachers offering this service to their communities so that they ease the burden on their families by taking the children away for a few hours, teaching them, and then so it helps with that. And then also we have set up tip-it-up hand washing facilities, especially in the rural areas, to reduce the amount of time women have to travel to go and look for water for hand washing. So at least if the tip-it-up is set up, unfortunately I couldn't project my presentation, but you would have seen a picture of the tip-it-up that has been set up in one of our communities. I hope that the presentation will be shared after. Then the other strategy we have had in terms of access to food, we are working with the local food distribution. At that time when food was being distributed, our members worked with the distributing team to ensure that the members within their community were able to get that food relief at the time when food was being distributed in the areas around Kampala. And then also urban farming to plant crops that easily germinate within a short period of time, that easily produce fruit in a short period of time. But what we are recommending is one, that there's need to address women burden through broader provision of services, access to resources such as water, and increased male engagement in both decision making but also planning with the women, because we have seen that the gender-based violence is as a result of this male dominancy and women being unable to air out the issues that they have freely. And because the men are spending a lot of time at home, it became an issue. So we are also asking for promotion of time-saving technology such as improved cooking stoves, also agriculture technologies, so that in this time when food is a problem, at least if you have urban farming and also other technologies that can be used for producing basic food as a basic necessity, then it would help a lot in providing nutritional needs, especially we have some cooperatives that are composed of fully HIV positive women, and so this nutrition is a very big issue in boosting their immunity. Then also we are talking of women economic empowerment strategies such as income generating activities and business opportunities for women to reduce the dependency and also to diversify their income. We are encouraging community cohesion using virtual means, because this is a technology drive nowadays. Everything is virtual, such as this meeting. So for example, we had also other disasters during the same period. We had floods in some areas and also the evictions that I talked about. So if we could have cooperatives where they can be able to coordinate with each other, maybe on a WhatsApp group, to know that this person has lost their livelihood. How can we help? Maybe use whatever they have to set up a temporary shelter in case of loss, or find temporary solutions that can attend to the needs of their members. I think cooperatives are still very necessary, and they're still one of the best solutions during this time. Then the last 3 points I have here is financial support and access to credit for both men and women, to provide relief like deferred payments or special lines of credit or temporary relaxation of repayments. Also, digital financial services, to work closely with saving groups to develop special plans to protect the sustainability of groups, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges has been the use of savings for basic needs. And so what about the other needs that will arise? Because housing is one of the basic needs, shelter is a basic need. And as you know, people are failing to pay rent, and so there's need for someone to be able to live in a house that they own. Then also addressing the risks of gender-based violence. We are partnering with NAWU, but also we need more partnerships in this area so that we can increase sensitization and also involve male leaders who can advocate for women's rights and speak out against gender-based violence. And then lastly, address internal operational issues of staff of cooperatives, have flexible work schedules to release stress and also support their mental health. I think I would like to thank the organizers of this conference again, and I've tried to squeeze in the 10 minutes, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Fiona, for that presentation. I think, again, it is very informative, practical issues that are happening in Uganda within the housing cooperatives. So let's get to the last one. The last one is Mrs. Jibril Bara. So please, Mrs. Jibril, take the floor.
This organization for organizing this, because it is further enhancing my cooperative thinking. Well, I'll be talking on the implication of COVID-19 impact on gender equality within the cooperative movements in Nigeria. Now, COVID-19 certainly is a global pandemic which has affected women, institutions. Impact on women generally is more devastating, especially in developing countries, which includes Nigeria. According to the World Health Organization, 40% of infected cases in Africa were women. So if we apply this same correct criterion to Nigeria, it means 40% of 36,107 cases registered in Nigeria as at July 2020, which was reported by one of our national dailies, and which equally amounts to 14,443, actually shows that this number likely to be women. Well, the women and cooperative is one of the largest operatives within the agricultural sector. In Nigeria, it constitutes not less than 70% of the cooperatives in the country, and it's found in all over the 774 wards. Every ward you go, you'll find an agricultural cooperative. And these cooperatives are in three segments. You have those who are registered, and those that are not registered, and those that are registered but get support. But then the most important thing about this is that most of these cooperatives, are formed and managed by women. And this cooperative, engage, the organs the cooperative engage is the government. And this includes establishments like ministries, women affairs, financial agencies, and so on. And the key activities include fish farming, poultry and animal husbandry, food and cash crop production, and processing and agricultural businesses. The key areas of assistance available to agricultural cooperatives are technical, that's training and support services and finance, and assistance provided by government and donor agencies. As it's been said by all the other groups that have spoken before me, data is very important in the management of cooperative and particularly in helping to mitigate the inequality, between the gender and inequity. Data is from my state, Niger State, and you can see our registered cooperatives, unregistered, and those that get support. I said when we started that the pandemic really affected women differently from men. And these are some of the ways in which it has affected our women, at least in my state. The first is this denial of access to health services with medical personnel who are unwilling to attend to patients. Well, on the onset of the pandemic, virtually everybody was afraid. You were not sure of who was infected since it was not easy for one to tell who is an affected patient. And then on the other side, just as we've said, the stigma. People, particularly when were not very willing to go to the hospital for fear of being declared as one of these corona cases. The close down brought about stay at home for the women, for everybody. And just as the last speaker on housing said, your comfort is determined by the type of a home you have. And if at one time, particularly in the afternoon, everybody is converged in one place, that helps in making for more violence, because little things that shouldn't even be looked at became the object of disagreement. And this aspect has greatly affected our women. There has been this stop in daily income because of the close down. And women in many situations are the heads of homes because they supply the livelihood. And one can imagine if this does not come, it means the entire family runs into problems, most of which of hunger, health challenges. And then the lockdown, if this continues, would create insecurity within the family and within the communities and the immediate environment of every one of us. Now, this increase in violence, the women are at the receiving end because they are not strong, the men are stronger, and they get the bashing from the stronger one, the gender, and domestic abuses at home. And one of the bits confronting the women in this period is lack of government direct support and assistance for members of the cooperative, especially women. Members of agricultural cooperative are unable to meet their demands because most of them who have collected these loans are business people, traders who after trading pay back. And now there is this lockup. They cannot go out. And there is no any other source of getting income, let alone to take care of themselves or repay back the loan they've taken. And we all know the banks will not give you more loans if you don't pay back the former one. And so that is adversely affecting our women in the cooperative world. Now, the government response to this agricultural cooperative. What the government of Nigeria has done is to provide free, interest-free loans that will help to cushion the present sufferings of our women. And it's given tax relief and moratorium on payment. So they've extended the payment period. So, and that would help you. And the most important thing the government has done is that, between the time of the close down to now, the number of rape has increased. In actual fact, in Nigeria, we've reported about 3,600. And so what the government has done is that now at the National Assembly of Nigeria, it has passed a law. Lifetime for rapists in prison. And one of the 36 states in the Federation, Kano State, is initiating castration for any rape, any person found raping. Now, from the information we have, all the states, we have 36 states, and all of them in their various ways are working to help alleviate this problem of food that is not available because of the situation we are in. 3 of these states that have visibly seen, Borno State is using all the women cooperative in its state to distribute about 1 billion naira funds to the people of the state. While Kwara State is targeting about 10,000 women in their broiler production initiative. And a place like Yobe State, has made provision for women in the distribution of palliative. They did not join them up with the men. And we know what that means. If all of them have to struggle, the women are not strong. There are others who are working to help mitigate the problem of this pandemic on women. One thing that the government is doing that it needs to change is thinking that it uses the cooperative to channel assistance to their members, instead of working with the cooperative to see how they can mitigate the spread of this pandemic. Now, there's the picture of receiving Yobe that is taking special care of the women. Our recommendation is that data is very, very vital, and I'm happy everybody is seeing through. We need this data to help in determining the number of women, and then we know what to do in addressing and reducing gender inequalities. But the thing is that the government cannot do it alone. We, the women, I think we need to be more, consistent in asking for this, in working for this, because nobody would want to give up what he has. The people who want to be equated with would not want to give away their position. And we have to go lobby and all that it takes to ensure that issues of inequality, the gap is actually narrowed. We have neutral cooperative societies, and we're saying that such societies should always make special provision for women so that these women are not surcharged. And then special measures that are taken to address this inequality and iniquity should be publicized so that our people who need it can take advantage of it. It's just been said, one of the problems we have is the capacity of the implementers of the government policies on cooperatives. I think in my place, a large number of, most of them are weak. And what we are asking that they should be trained to be able to take on this responsibility. Well, based on our current experiences and lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to start working on a framework and creation of specific special response vehicles for attending to needs of women in emergencies. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, this COVID-19 global pandemic actually caught everybody unaware. A lot of lessons have been learned, and more of further lessons are unfolding. We need to analyze all these lessons and phases of this global pandemic. Our results should equip us with what we require to develop a framework and strategies for confronting and managing agricultural cooperatives and related gender issues in a future occurrence of a lesser or bigger multitude than that of COVID-19 effectively and efficiently. I think before I close up, I want to say to the person who asked the question, cooperative society network has not been too strong in Nigeria. He's correct. And that's why I'm happy at this conference. And what we intend doing after listening to all that is happening and knowing that we effect could assist, we would go into some discussions with them to see how they can help us really get properly organized. I want to thank this group for giving us the opportunity, me particularly, to appear in this. I thank you and have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Bala, for that, again, very informative presentation. We are learning a lot, and that brings us to the end of the presentations. And like you can see, we have really gone past our time because we wanted by now to have added the questions and answers. But even though we may not have a very elaborate interaction, probably what I think is because people have been typing their issues on the group chat, and therefore we have quite a lot of information that has been exchanged here. But I would like maybe before we conclude to give each of the presenters just a minute to just pick what they think has been has come out from their presentation from the participant, and just address it, because we may not be able to address everything. Most of it has been answered on the group chat. So if that is okay, then I would like to ask Mr. Jonathan Kioko. I hope, Jonathan, you are still with us. Is
Yes.
there something you want to say as the last word?
Thank you. I think it was quite an informative session. Maybe I just want to address one question which was raised by one of the participants involved in agriculture, but mainly at production level. How can we move women up the value chain so that they start gaining economically? It's very true that most of the time women in the agriculture sector provide labor, but as you move up the value chain, they miss out. This is one of the areas that we look at, and we work very closely with us to ensure that where women are, they are missing, why they are missing, and we begin to address all those gaps, beginning from the institutional level. Maybe it's a gap in terms of the bylaws that have been set that do not articulate gender equality issues, or also it could be societal norms that maybe have regularized men taking all the incomes from, say, dairy or coffee, and the women have no say. We begin to address that over time, and that way you find that women take up their positions. And again, beyond that, we also, like I mentioned, in ensuring that women participate, both as members, they are registered as members, and also in the leadership of cooperatives. That way they are able to benefit at the cooperative and also take part in sharing the benefits that arise from the value chain that they work in. Maybe that is what I would say for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan, for that addition. Monica, is Monica still with us? Apparently not. Dr. Nadine?
Yes.
Yeah, please, a minute to respond to anything you want.
And then Monica is also here.
Okay.
Oh, Okay, so
I've just looked at the comments that have come on my presentation. There's about 7 comments and people have been very excited. Now, there are 4 things they have mentioned and I'll tell you in 1 minute. On the gender-based violence in cooperatives, they think it's a great unit because it's not there and we don't even have a sexual harassment committee. It's there in many countries and it's not. I think that's a good idea to start with a 3-member committee. 1. Decision-making platforms. Yes, it has to be in the cooperative. You know, in Asia Pacific, I did a study of 18 countries and found not even 10% women were on the board. Now, you got to make a study and find out in decision-making in cooperatives how many women are there. Third is gender disaggregated data. Please do for Africa a study on gender disaggregated data on status of women in cooperative like Asia Pacific did. Lastly, I just want to make 1 point on stereotypes. Get your male children to do household work. Here's a great opportunity and get the men also to do it. Last, let me thank Andrea, Secretary of the Gender Equality Committee. She's been very excited about this meeting and, you know, encouraged me to attend it. I'd like to thank Professor Esther because at least I can see you and I could meet you. All power to African women from Asia. Take care and all the best.
Thank you very much, Nadine. And we are very honored that you are able to come from the Global Committee and also pass our regards to them when you talk to them next. Thank you so much. Then Monica, you are still there. You can I give you 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to respond to a question that came earlier about whether cooperatives, cooperatives are often positioned as wholly positive player in advancing gender equality, whether that is true or not. I think initially cooperatives were male dominated from many years ago when the cooperative movement was initiated. They were male dominated, and that is how we effect, for us in Uganda, we effect and us in the partnership come in to mainstream gender in cooperatives. So the cooperatives that we effect was partnering with were largely male dominated. So we are looking at having more women in the cooperatives, but also young people, youth, because they were male dominated, but older men. So you are right to say that, to question whether this is true or not, because initially they were male dominated. With more women coming in and with training on gender equality, we are seeing more women in leadership of cooperatives, women engaged in decision making, even in the kind of enterprises to be engaged in. For example, we have a Holy Coffee cooperative, and women have started intercropping banana in the coffee so that they can make money, because bananas, you'll make money almost throughout the year, and that is what women want. Women need quick turnaround. So we are beginning seeing cooperatives growing and becoming gender responsive, and therefore women's rights are also beginning to be protected in cooperatives. During the lockdown, the members of our cooperatives actually formed what they called border ambulance. Border are the motorcycles that we use for traveling. So they formed border ambulances and partnered with the government to be able to take sick people to hospital, but also women who are in labor, women who are about to give birth. So you see that there's a difference happening with cooperatives working together in communities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Then I want to call upon Dr. Simel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gicheri. This was indeed a very rich conversation, very practical, but also conceptual. I've learned a lot from food security, housing, use of social media. So I would suggest to the organizers not only putting the presentations and the recording, but perhaps extracting from this rich conversation a report of some sort. I think this is really sorely missing. And based on your concept note, the presentations here and the questions that came, if these could be consolidated in a report. This would not only be useful for Africa in the context of gender issues and cooperative challenges and responses, but also for other regions of the world. And any support you may need from us in contributing to developing such a report, we are ready to support you. Thanks to ICA-Africa and WeEffect for inviting us. Thanks, Dr. Gicheru. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith, for that very useful conclusion and recommendation. And we truly will want to collaborate with you to see that that kind of a report comes out. Yeah. So let me go to Masejelo. Mase, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, 1 minute, please.
So my video is not, the host has, I cannot start my video.
Okay, maybe you can just respond to your questions since we can hear your voice. Oh, good.
Thank you, thank you. So the question that I've been asked is that I provide an example where the circles have been providing financial support to women to overcome the difficulties related to COVID-19, loss of income, or difficulty to keep the business running or paying back loans, and what the union, the role of union to help and assist these circles and women. Let me say that it is not specific that the circles have a deliberate move to just deal with the women, because every initiative has been to the members of the circle, and that the circles have been dealing in their own way. Every circle has an initiative to support the members, especially dealing with the loans. So those who have not been able to pay their loans, they have either been assisted to restructure their loans, or there is the way each individual member is talking to their circle to be assisted in terms of the problems they are encountering in terms of not being able to repay their loan. Then how has the union assisted? We have done several communications to the circles, assisting them or telling them of how to deal with the finances or the business in times of this pandemic. And one of them is going slow or giving short-term loans, because when they give long-term loans at this time, when members are experiencing difficulties, it means that the loans are not going to be repaid in the long run or within this time round. And therefore, we encourage them to give short-term loans. At least that time they may be assured of repaying the same. What that therefore means is that the circles are experiencing a lot of liquidity. They have a lot of liquidity, and what that also means is that even as within the Central Finance Fund, where we have that facility where we finance the circles, they are not also coming for the loans. So the specific facilities where we are financing now the gender, I can say that there are no specific loans or facilities for the women, but it is a docket for everyone. Then in terms of what is it specific for the pandemic, as I said earlier, Cusco is a member of the Cooperative COVID Response Committee. And at the moment, we have been able to give the first batch of the beneficiaries who have been for the Nairobi region. The next batch, we have given 5,000. The next row to be, the next 5,000 to be for the area around Naivasha and Kisumu. So God willing, we should be able to give the next 5,000, another 5,000, up to 15,000. Our desire was to give at least 500,000 households, but the fund has not been very successful because the members are equally affected and the societies have not been able to mobilize that kind of funding. So I may say that the efforts are just within the societies themselves, but as a union, we also continue to give communications on how to deal with these issues as the information comes to us or when we feel that the information is important to the SACCO sector.
Thank you, Mercy.
Thank you very much, and it has been a great pleasure being on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mercy. So Grace, Neema, I think now I'll give 0.5 minutes. Grace?
So just echoing Dr. Isim's comments, I would also like to just say, maybe we should identify 1 or 2 issues that we want to address when it comes to this topic. And once we have identified that, we can identify champions within the cooperative movement whom we want to profile as social media influencers and begin to start a campaign that will drive a conversation around key issues and get tangible results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. Fiona?
For me, I would like to thank the ICA-Africa and WeEffect particularly for supporting cooperatives. And I think we need to increase our effort during this digital time to try and encourage the cooperatives to move from the way we used to do things to adopt the new way of doing things digitally. And I like what Nima has just said, we need to move with the influencers in the cooperative movement. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Mrs. Bala. Last comment. Is she still with us? I think she may have left. Okay, now for me, I think before I head back to the ICA office, I want to say that I feel that we have met our expectations in this workshop or this webinar, because one of the things we wanted to see is to gain better understanding of gender dimensions in this period of COVID-19, and I think we have shared a lot. We are now not the same as we came. We have learned a lot from other countries and seen how they are dealing with the issue. So we have a lot that we have shared and which we can adopt. We have also seen the importance of data to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on women and girls. And I think now this is more clear for us. And just as Grace has said, we may find a way of profiling one of our own, so that the messages can pass through social media and be more understood. We have also acquired knowledge on self-branding, imaging as a response to combating the COVID-19 pandemic and other crises. I may also say that we have gained understanding on possible strategies to mitigate and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic by the cooperators with the recommendations for action, because we have had some of the case studies with very clear strategies they have used and which we should be able to try on our own. I think as I conclude, I also say the recommendation by SMEL, again, I want to repeat, is very much welcome. And we are truly going to document this. Many participants have also been asking whether we are going to share the presentations. And I think the ICA office will ensure that this is done so that what we didn't get, because the time was too short, we can be able to read for ourselves. Yeah, so having said that, I want to thank all the presenters for accepting. Some of them, we gave you very little time and you found it worthy to come and share with us in this forum. So I want to say thank you very much to all of you. Now, I would like now to, I don't know whether Dr. Sifa is still with us.
So to extend my gratitude to all the speakers and also our co-organizer WeEffect for this wonderful webinar, and more so the male participants, because most of the time when we see gender issues, we tend to sideline them to women and we leave them for women. But I've seen quite a number of men who have been engaged from the beginning up to now. And we assure you that gender is not only about women, though the women are the most marginalized, as I said, in the gender group. So that is the reason. But we are very much thankful, and please keep connecting, and the purpose of this particular meet is also to reconnect, but also to exchange. And I hope we have been, you have found a new friend or a new colleague today. On July 31st, I think we'll be having another webinar on the AACO, that is the Agricultural, African Agricultural Cooperative organization members. So you are all again welcome. Let's talk about agriculture. Food is the most important thing we have found during this COVID era. Thank you very much. And once again, God bless you. Bye.